Griff Hamlin here. Welcome and thanks for joining me today. In today's video, we are going to talk about something that I affectionately call the blues squeeze. And the blues squeeze is actually a fairly straightforward technique. Let's look at it. Let's say we have I'll say the 4-note solo pattern. Okay, and you might also look at that as like the house pattern or the top of box 2 in A minor. Okay, so if that root is there at the 10th fret 2nd string, right, then I have the flatted 7th down at the 8th fret, also on the 2nd string. If I reach down for that 9th fret on the 3rd string, of course I have the 5th of the scale, the E. So 5th, flat 7th, root, and then moving up here to the 8th fret of the 1st string, this is kind of the magic note because this is the flatted 3rd. And then I have a 4th, right, which is here at the 10th fret. So now I can bend that 10th fret up, okay? Now, and that's a bend because it's going up to the E an octave above that. So that's a bend, right? That's I'll say an official note. Okay, when I do a bend like that, I'm bending officially from D to E, or officially from the 4th of the scale to the 5th of the scale. It's very specific in pitch where I'm ending up, okay? When I do the blues squeeze, I do it on the flatted 3rd. And you see I'm kind of, it's not quite a half step. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. It could get to be a whole half step, but it's not usually quite that far. It's sort of this kind of middle ground between the flatted 3rd and the major 3rd. Okay, now there's two things that are important about that. First, why? Why on earth would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. So it's a blues thing. It doesn't have to make sense. If we're playing over, let's say an A7 chord, right? This blues in A, and of course you can put this anywhere. The nice thing about these patterns is that if I change the key, that's still the flatted 3rd. Okay, if I'm playing down here, once I learn that in relation to the root, that note is the flatted 3rd. Once I learn that one time, it holds the same for every key. That never changes, okay? So it's a good thing. It's one of the reasons that I tend to speak in numbers a lot, is because of the fact that it's the same for every key. All we do on a guitar is just kind of slide. You know, I make the joke when somebody says, can you take that up a half step? I sort of bang on the side of my guitar and bend it up. You know, now we're changed keys. If I do that, now I'm in that key. If I need another key, I just go there. Okay, so all of the keys look the same to us. So that's kind of cool. So you want to learn in your patterns which note is the flatted 3rd, okay? So we already talked about, you know, sort of the top of box 2, right? There's my root in a minor key. Now, of course, if I was doing this in a major key, all bets are off. You don't use this approach if you're looking to do a major blues thing because you're already playing a major 3rd. So if we are playing in A, okay, and let's say we're playing, you know, good old box 1, right? So there's a root, there's a flatted 3rd. Okay, so that's eligible for a little pull. 4th, 5th, flat, 7th, root. That means after the root, there's that kind of squeeze. 4, 5, flat, 7, root, and squeeze. And that note makes sense because it's the same note. It's shared with that top of box 2. Same thing down here, right? If you tend to think in terms of the extensions, and I'm sure you probably heard that a bunch of times in your life. It's that little pull on it. All right, so now that we know what the squeeze is, right? We're kind of taking that flatted 3rd and sort of bending it up, not quite a half step, but It's not really a flatted third anymore. It's not really a major third. Why would we want to do it? Well, if you think about it, you may have heard that you want to use the major blues sound over the 1 chord and the minor blues sound over the 4 and the 5 chord. And while that's kind of an overgeneralization, you don't have to always use the major sound over the 1, and you don't always have to use, you do have to use the minor sound if your only options are major and minor blues, that being major blues, that being minor blues. And if those are the only 2 options you're talking about, then for the 4 and the 5 chord in your blues, your only options for scales are the minor blues. You can't use the major blues over that. It won't sound good. There's a couple of notes that clash. You can sneak it in around the 5 chord, to be fair, but I don't recommend it. It's an unusual sound. Definitely, though, you don't want to use that over the 4 chord. However, over the 1 chord, you do have your choice. And that major blues sound has that major third in it. Okay, well, what you can do, if you don't want to have to change patterns, is just use, let's say, box 1. And when that 1 chord comes around, that's when you do your blues squeeze. So if it's the 4 chord, and then when it goes to the 1 chord, you kind of do that little blues squeeze. And you can hear that what it'll do is it'll just kind of sit in a little bit better with that 1 chord, okay? And you can, of course, practice this over, like if you want to just record yourself into a looper, just play a 1 chord vamp. Just play the A7 for a while. And just play over that. It'll go something like this. There's the third. Right, we have one up here. So you give it that little squeeze, kind of make it sit. And then there's that one down there. So, you've got the 3 different thirds. You just kind of experiment a little bit with all of them. Just sort of get that feel for where those thirds are in the patterns that you're using. And then you can kind of start to incorporate them in. So as you play over your blues, when you hear, oh, I'm on the 1 chord now, you give it that little squeeze. When you hear, I'm over the 4 and the 5 chord, you don't give it the little squeeze. And that's all there is to it. And now what you're doing is you're basically incorporating that sort of sweetness of the major blues sound without actually changing your pattern. You're still fundamentally playing the minor blues sound. And this is a very popular and a very common technique, and it sounds great. And all you have to do is just be aware. You hopefully already are aware of where your roots are. Well, the very next note in the pattern is always the flatted third, because this is the minor pentatonic scale. So that's always the way it's going to work. So hopefully you're already aware of where your roots are. The very next note is the flatted third. That's where you do your blues squeeze and you're good to go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a little bit over a jam track. Any shuffle blues, any slow blues, any kind of blues jam track will work. Of course, I'm using the key of A, but again, any key will work. This works for any style. This works for any key, as long as it's a 12-bar blues and it follows the same general patterns. Of course, if they're minor chords, if you're playing over a minor blues, you're not going to want to use a major sound. Hopefully that's obvious, but just in case, I'll let you know. So any blues that's following sort of the traditional form, whether it be 12-bar or 8-bar, and relying on dominant 7th chords, this technique will work. So I'm going to play a little bit on the way out, but hopefully you dug this video and hopefully give you some ideas of some stuff to try. And I look forward to seeing you again in the near future. Take care. 2, 3, 4.